Nobody heard that.
I was whispering.
I didn't even hear that, and I'm sitting next to you.
What? What?
What I said was, welcome to the Crash Chords podcast.
Oh, okay. Hey, yeah, the light's on. Cool.
Yes, the mic light is on. We are on the air at the glorious Studio 2J. A gag I'm stealing from the Epic podcast. And Schaefer can yell at me about it next month.
I wanted to believe that was original. I really did.
Well, you know. Anyway, welcome to another week of the podcast. There was something I wanted to bring up quickly in the beginning, but I have lost my train of thought. Shocking. I recently got to do a bunch more interviews for autographs. We keep them coming in, so I'm excited that that series is going well so far. By now you've heard our 4th episode with Cool Z, indie rocker and rapper, which was a blast to talk to. He was the first and only guest I've ever interviewed on a gondola, or gondola.
A gondola. And explain a gondola, this is for skiing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, because I originally assumed, and many listeners may well assume, that he was on one of the canals of Venice.
No, because he says he's in Colorado.
You like trains.
Okay.
You should have immediately went to a type of train car.
Train car?
Yeah, there's a train car. It's called a gondola. It's basically...
But it's a suspended, then it's a tram, really. It has more in common with a tram than a train.
A gondola is a boxcar with the top cut off. It's just basically a big bowl for stuff. In fact, it's commonly used to carry both coal, junk, rocks, sand, any sort of stuff that you just want to pile in and then dump out.
Cool.
Your junk.
Junk.
Yeah, junk.
That was actually a lucid explanation.
Yes.
Yes.
In fact,
my faith has gone up to maybe 51% now.
I'm breaking even.
That's right. He was 35 like about 10 minutes ago. That was before the red light went on.
But the light's green.
The light is... Our audience is colorblind.
Wow.
We should hope our audience is colorblind, actually. That's
I know.
what I'm trying to convey.
Yeah, I know.
Yes,
I understand what you meant.
Well, maybe because
Asshole.
we're an audio casting instead of a video casting.
I know, we kind of pigeonholed ourselves, right?
Yeah.
We kind of got away with being colorblind.
Well, no, the light's now purple because it doesn't really matter what color it is. They can't see it.
See, now you're playing along, eh? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well done, gents. Well done.
Anything else you would like to discuss, Storm?
No. Let's get into this week's album, which was my choice. So, the album is by an artist named Damon Albarn. It's his solo record, Everyday Robots. And I want to talk a little bit about Damon Albarn, who most of you might know either as one of the... I believe he plays both bass and sings in Blur, which was his first huge band. You'd know them for Song 2, or more commonly known as the A Woohoo song, because everyone only remembers the chorus, even though I happen to remember the whole song. He was also, in the early 2000s, very well known for teaming up with one of the Tank Girl creators, Jamie Hellett, for the Gorillaz, which were a virtual band, finger quotes, because they don't really exist in the physical space. They're animated. So I want to take you back to a story of how I first got into Damon again after I had known Blur but kind of fell out of touch with them. It's early 2000s. I was babysitting my girlfriend at the time's little sister with her, and she had gone up to put her little sister to bed, and I'm sitting just watching MTV back when it was still sort of relevant. I'm flipping channels, and this music video starts, and it's a cartoon. And it's got this, slow drum and a bass line. And then I hear this whiny, high-pitched singer who sounds familiar, singing that he's happy and he's feeling glad he's got sunshine in a bag. And at this point, I don't know what the hell I'm watching. There's anthropomorphic people who look sort of like gorillas, and then there are actual gorillas. Then there's a drummer possessed by a giant ghost who's rapping. And I watched the video to the end because I didn't know what the hell was going on. Turns out it was the Gorillaz and their song Clint Eastwood, which spiraled me right into getting into the Gorillaz.
And the animation is sort of in the anime style, correct?
Similar, yeah. It's Jamie, I think, was influenced by that, and he also his artwork resembles. He did comics, and he did. There's a band called Mindless Self-Indulgence. They have an album called Frankenstein Girls Seem Strangely Attractive. He did the cover art for that. It was one of the first albums he'd really done major cover art for.
You would
And
actually.
Well, I think that's
animation style.
actually as an album cover and just as figures of the band that are meant to represent the band as a whole. I think it was one of the most successful because I think everyone had the same sort of perk of curiosity as you. Who is this? What are they? Why is there not a band in the place of where these animated characters are?
And when I went back and researched it at the time, I was like, oh, it's Damon. I know Damon from Blur, and I was very invested at that point. Gorillaz have had many albums now at this point, and now Damon has decided to do a solo record. He's a very talented musician. This is the thing I wanted to sum up this intro with. So on this album specifically, Damon plays 10 instruments.
Whew.
10 that he's edited together himself. Piano, guitar, the omnichord, which is an electronic music device, a ukulele, drum machine, which can be considered an instrument, bass. He sings in the choir that's on here, though that's more vocals. He obviously is lead vocals, his own backing vocals, but he also plays the Korg M1, which is a keyboard synthesizer sound machine combo, as well as just a plain synthesizer.
Mm-hmm. Korgs are high end.
Yes.
Lots of people should have a Korg in addition to your regular digital piano synth.
So clearly, he is a very talented musician. He has access to a lot of different skills and talents, and it comes through in the record. I mean, I think that as we get into it, the fact that he was able to pretty much streamline the Gorillaz, of course with other artists doing vocals and helping with instrumentation or mixing and DJs, but the Gorillaz and a lot of Blur's writing was very much his work. And this album is all his work. This is all him. He had collaborators and did some sampling, but this is mostly his efforts.
Yeah, he did have some help. For instance, he did have Brian Eno is featured in a couple of tracks,
as well as Bats for Lashes, otherwise known as Natasha Khan, is also featured on one of the tracks.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, for one thing, it's the success of the Gorillaz that I'm sure enabled him to garner all this support and all this helping out. But either way, he's still an incredibly talented musician who I had every bit of confidence that this was at least going to leave me with some impression that I got after my favorite album by the Gorillaz, and that was Demon Days. There definitely is some crossover. I remember when we introduced this as this week's interview last week, John mentioned that it could be overlapped or it could be what was the word you used, John? Do you remember that?
I've got no idea.
He doesn't remember anything.
Yeah, either
undiluted.
Yeah, undiluted. That's exactly what it was.
That was what you said. Undiluted.
Probably exactly what it was. You
can take my word. That's what you
it
said.
could be just the core of what his ideas are. His choices of mixing, his choices of instrumentation.
Oh wait,
because
that would be diluted.
No, it wouldn't be diluted. It would just be him. It's undiluted. It's not any interaction from any other.
Well, it's
producers.
diluted with respect to the Gorillaz.
Oh. I'm losing you. Is there a sieve somewhere here? Like what?
It's pared down. It's
Thank
thinner.
you.
It's the core essence of what I suppose inspired much of the Gorillaz' work, and it's interesting because I had never heard what he had done on his own. So that brings us right into this album. Everyday Robots, which is the title,
and is also the first track.
Also the first track. Now, it was immediately clear to me that this is a little more of a fluid artistic style than his work with the Gorillaz in general. It's very texture heavy, and it has these chillingly evasive chords, this chillingly evasive progression. And sometimes the driving progression of this first track can feel comfortably pop-oriented, akin to sort of the worldly anthemized tracks that the Beatles introduced in their late period. Think the solemn but unifying tracks of their late period, like Hey Jude or Something. You can find it in the downward progression in this track, and it kind of feels as if the track is about to reel itself back to its home key, C major, as if that was the home key. But it's evasive in the sense that there's great care here never to fulfill that need for the home key. So each time we hover around G, the 5 chord, instead of pulling down comfortably to C, it usually lingers and slides itself up to B diminished chord, kind of like a suspended question mark. It's too smooth to be full of tension, but it's enigmatic and unfulfilled, and I think that defines this whole track very well.
That is also presented with the choice of having what we're pretty sure is a violin to be a screech work, a screech beat work.
We're both getting ahead of ourselves, though, because we completely skipped over the introduction to the intro track.
I was getting to the first intro to that, because that, of course, is the that's connected to, I think, the Damon Albarn that we know, because there was a lot of soundbite work all throughout the Gorillaz, and we find that right here up front, which is just a simple quote, which we determined to be a quote by Richard Buckley.
Correct.
So it was a comedian, well-known
in the 40s and 50s.
British comedian, 40s, 50s, throughout the 60s. And the quote, very simply, is, "They didn't know where they was going, but they knew where they was, wasn't it?"
And then a laugh of the audience. Yeah.
So, I suppose it speaks to the...
No. They know where they were going, but they didn't know where they were going. But they knew that where they actually were wasn't where they were going.
Yeah.
That is the full continuation.
And
That's the
it's this
explanation
idea
of the
that the
which is kind of a nebulous idea in and of itself.
It embodies the sense of not having direction.
Yeah.
Which is I think, characterized in the music itself and in that sort of evasive chord progression.
Yes, well, and also
it knows where it is.
The song lyrically is about essentially people so reliant on technology they aren't aware of where they are or where they're going. They're lost in this haze of being on the phone or being involved in what's in front of them and not being aware. Even
further than that, it's almost like he's almost explaining the isolation that comes with all this technology that we have in our lives. Just the idea of being so introverted into what's in the palm of our hands, as opposed to, talking to the people standing right next to you, which is by no means not a new idea, but it's kind of a new idea for music itself to really approach that.
Well, I think that exactly what you're saying right now is sort of that unfulfilled. I would define his vision of it, his approach to it, as being delicately uncomfortable. Because there's a familiarity. Obviously, we grew up in a society with technology surrounding us, and there's a familiarity to it that we sort of can't separate ourselves from it. But there's this unfulfilled nature that always lingers in the background, a sort of question in our heads: are we missing something, or some sort of truth to humanity because we are still living in the now?
And I would say that his choice of instruments actually do a lot to speak to the illusions that he makes in just the lyrics, because the piano work can double as the idea of tapping upon the screen. The percussion is just the heavy beat work of life, and those violin screeching are just the interruptions of your Facebook status.
And that's what I wanted to return to.
There's so much imagery just in those instruments.
That's what I wanted to return to. I mean, I think it's up in the air as to what you could characterize that violin screech as. But it is clear that that's part of that sort of delicately uncomfortable feel, because it's beautiful in a way, and yet it's this persistent loop, just a high register violin that trills into the one non-scale tone on this entire track that I can discern, at least, and that's an A flat. It just hangs out there as yet another question mark, a question that keeps asking itself over and over throughout the entire song. And even the whole phrase has this sort of hesitant urgency about it, this crescendo that builds up to the trill, and then it just fades out of it. And you hear this over and over and over again, just every measure or so. It's chilling in a way, and yet you can't help but be tuned into its beauty. So, again, I don't want to get too close to the theme work of this album quite yet. It's way too early, especially for the average listener without knowing anything about this album, as opposed to dive into that. But these are definitely foreshadowing tools at his disposal. Yeah. And they're very well utilized. I think this was an excellent opening track.
Well, it's definitely one of the best, in my opinion, opening tracks that's also a title track. I mean, unfortunately, with title tracks, I feel like there's a lot of expectation, especially if there's a title track in the middle or the end of an album. this is the name of the album, and it's also a song on the record. So you assume it's going to be very impactful to the entire arc. And sometimes those title tracks just fall short because of that over arc. Whereas here, I think it really fulfills the exact idea of everyday robots and kind of gives way to that.
It's in the one verse that he says, "Everyday robots just touch thumbs. Swimming in lingo, they become stricken in a status sea of one more vacancy."
See, that's where you really kind of get into the technological
that just hones
elements.
it in right there. It's great double entendres with the choice of words, just to paint the imagery that he's going for. It does a great solidifying effect, and I love the way he trails off his inflection on those fourth lines of each of the verses, which just gives that little glimpse of humanity. It's that pacing he throws in there that's just great.
Well, and this is a great point to talk about also his vocals. Because if you listen to the Gorillaz or Blur or any of Damon's solo work, if you saw Journey to the West, which was the show that he had done with Jamie that was playing in Brooklyn, I don't remember where.
Or the variety of compilations and guest spots he's done.
You know that his voice has this kind of smooth ease to it. It's
effortless. It sounds almost like he's not even singing at all, but it just comes out.
I don't want to say that it's effortless. I want to say it sounds effortless.
Well,
I'm sure there's work to it.
Of course there's work to it. I mean, in terms of inflection, there's work to it. But it's clear that he's not singing out. He's always singing down.
Yeah.
It's always more matter-of-factual than it is this sort of grandiose statement.
Almost
a lot of times he just really has to speak, and it comes across as sounding musical. I don't think that's any form of a vague insult to just presume that someone's natural inflection is musical. It's one of those compliments that just is.
And I think that's one of the greatest strengths that he's always had. It's what made 2D, the character that his voice represents in the Gorillaz, stand out so well. Even though the character is very bland, because he's a zombie, essentially, is the character. That kind of mellow inflection gave him character, because he was this easygoing personality, but had this kind of mellow cadence mixed with certain songs, gave this vastness to the emotionality of it. And he conveys that here in songs on this record as well.
Well, the usage is very appropriate just because of the fact that his voice is naturally comforting. So it puts you in a comfortable or at least familiar place.
Yeah.
And that's what we are. We are familiar with the digital age, so it's not a place that's going to unsettle us fundamentally unless we start really thinking about the existential implications of it all. And that's where you really get into the intriguing stuff, the uncomfortable element, as I said, delicately uncomfortable element that he throws in here with the violin, with actually just straight up in the first tone of the track, right after that soundbite, the first tone sort of hammers out that tritone, which is the core of the diminished chord that returns through later and later, which is the closest thing you could even pin to the key of this piece, which almost implies that it's in Locrian. But again, I wouldn't go so far with that. Either way, it's implied. He stays away from the most comfortable zone where you would expect this piece to turn at every corner.
And I think you get a sense of that even in the next track.
Well, I want to talk about just one more thing, and that's the string accompaniment.
The final,
which is at the very end
of the second violin, because that second violin did not replace the first piece. It instead
it complements it.
It tried to harmonize with it.
They were separate. The screeching violin that had been throughout the song continues throughout the tail end of it, the middle tail end. But there's an actual violin in that solos as well that adds a dichotomy and really shows the beautiful breadth of the violin playing, which...
Well, let's be clear here. I believe that was a string ensemble. It's very, very distinct from the screeching violin. One is used as a soundbite. It is probably looped. And that, as I said, is the recurring motif of this track. Whereas the string ensemble is just this gorgeous element that I think brings to life that sort of existential question of where are you in this digital world.
Yeah.
And it's the key word to use here is just taste. It's very well orchestrated. It glides right along with his cagey progression here, and it comes across as one of the anthems that I stated earlier, the kind of anthem that you would expect to drive from really classic, long-lasting names like the Beatles and their more personal works like Something.
Right.
or Hey Jude, say. Anyway, it's an interesting premise, a very interesting premise for this album. And from there, we will go into the second song, and that is Hostels.
Which starts with a soundbite that ends up being looped throughout the track, that ends up sounding fairly musical, but the best we can surmise is, because we don't know for sure, it sounds like a dog barking on a loop. A hostile dog barking.
I interpreted this as a few things, and obviously this is the fun game we get to play without actually, being in the studio and perhaps never being able to know. It could be just that. It's one of the first impressions that I got. Another thing that was thrown around was the possibility that it's taken from sliding down a guitar, sliding down the guitar strings and the steel work as you go down the frets tends to make that kind of grating sound. Obviously, no matter what it is, it's put through several different filters, and it comes across as a very hollow sound that could sound metallic or even wooden at times.
And it gave an overarching hollowness to the song because it was constant throughout it, and the rest of the instruments mixed with it but never overshadowed.
It played the same role as the violin in the first track.
Absolutely it did.
Now that said,
just to add dissonance. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't the only part where that dissonance is coming in. The very light piano work that is sprinkled throughout there.
We'll get to that because that doesn't appear until later. I want to talk about just this opening
chorus.
Yeah, well, if you could even call it a chorus. There's a sort of repeating loop here. But I just want to begin with this opening verse, which is a sort of cycle in of itself. Because apart from these little grating sounds here and there, this is a much more open and accepting song, I think, than the first track. It's slow, it's deliberate, it's really quite a bit thinner, and it's driven by an acoustic guitar that really only implies just three major chords. The minor 1, the major 3, and the major 4 chord, which the major 4 is major because it has the raised 6th, so that means we're definitely in Dorian for this track. And the guitar, for these 3 chords, just simply seesaws between the first and the third intervals of these chords. But now, as with every simple progression, the one thing that often keeps things interesting here is a unique cycle of these progressions. So there are moments where going from having a single chord progression encompassing an entire measure to suddenly having 2 chords in a measure with the percussive accent doubling as well, it can kind of throw off your natural counting of this rhythm. But we are in 4/4, and we can typically count 4/4 in our sleep. But when something fools us, it wakes us up. And this track is indeed fooling us. It never leaves 4/4, and there is a cycle here that lasts for 8 measures. The first measure, you get just the minor 1, the entirety. The second measure, you get just the major 4 for its entirety. The third is a half and half deal. There's 2 beats of a major 3 and then 2 beats of a minor 4. The fourth measure is all the 4 chord in its entirety. The fifth measure is half 3, half 1. The sixth is the minor 1 in its entirety, and the seventh and eighth are both all the major 3 in its entirety. So the deception here comes at the end of that cycle with a little mini progression within all of the stuff I just said, which is 3, 1, 4, is suddenly broken. And that's where this track carries a similarly unsettled tone as the first track did, because we break that cycle and it throws off that counting just a little bit. It's a marvelous use of how 3 simple chords can be intriguing and enrapturing in their own right.
Well, it's a very big advocate for simple doesn't mean boring.
Bingo.
And also on top of it, both of these songs emotionally convey, because I forgot to bring it up in the first track, a comfortable numbness that we will see in other places on the album, but it's very apparent in these first 2 tracks. This idea of being very comfortable with falling into being an everyday robot, robotically moving through life.
Pink Floyd would be intrigued.
I would debate that in this track. In the first track, I'm definitely on board with it, but in this one, the fact that the guitar is so close to the microphone recording it keeps it from just being numbing. The light piano, the very, very simple piano work that's being thrown on top of it, while it does seem innocuous, feels very ominous when you get down to the chord of it. The core of it. It feels like there's some sort of pressure being put onto it here.
So that comes in the second section. Just to go chronologically here, we get this next section, which is sort of an A prime. It really is much of the same cycle that we just had, albeit thickened up by kind of a pedal function down at the bottom end. But we have the synth, we have a background choir now, and then yes, we also have that high register piano, which loosely crams in about 6 sets of triplets over the course of the 4/4 measure, or simply 2 sets of non-uplets, if you will.
Non-uplets.
Non-uplets.
That's a new word for me.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever had to use.
Well, if you know your prefixes, I bet you could figure it out.
I would agree with John in his amendment to my emotional statement. However, I will evolve it by saying that the first track is a comfortable numbness. The second track is an unsettling numbness. There's still an air of numbness, but it's being broken down by this almost eerie, unsettling feeling, like you're starting to come out of it because you're starting to be rattled a bit.
But here's the question, just to bring that back to this piano here. Do you think that is caused by the piano? Because I felt that almost was a little bit innocuous, as you originally said.
It's just the way the piano is accenting with those triplets. If it adds pressure very, very lightly, just a little bit of an undertow. It's not.
It's color.
There is hostility
it really is
here.
just color at its core.
But there is hostility here. It's not just that pure numb. You're getting dejected. You're feeling it's becoming almost a depressive type of feeling.
Well, I have one proposal, and it goes in line with why I felt the need to break down the rhythm of these little piano broken triads. I mean, non-uplets is if you're counting it strictly, which would be 2 sets of 9 over the course of a 4/4 measure. Mm-hmm. It's very rapid to the point that it almost is besides the point. It's color. So sometimes it can strike me as arrhythmic, and I think that has a purpose here, and that is the fact that when you introduce something arrhythmic, it has a human character to it. It has this personal factor, but it also it breaks free from the norm. It breaks free from what you'd expect. It breaks free from expectations. In general, I think that goes in line with the sort of technological element here, and that's one reason why you may find it so pleasantly eerie.
Okay, I could get on board with that.
Okay. Seeing as we're agreeing.
I don't really have an argument for that. But I do feel like this song also is a really good setup for the next one. I feel like the way that this song progresses, the hollowness and the metallicness of it, of the sound anyway, kind of, I felt, worked really well for what it moved into.
Let's go over one more thing here, because this track did have one other section to it, and that was the bridge. The bridge is a very important section of this track, and it does tie into what you're about to talk about, and that's the transition into the next track. The bridge is interesting because of the fact that the piano, it starts on the 5, and it walks its way down the entire Dorian scale here, which is very intriguing because that's a break from this cyclical pattern that we've had over and over and over again. Meanwhile, the string accompaniment here is even stronger than it was in the first track. It is breathtaking at this point. It's one of those examples of just superb voice leading from one chord to the next, so that despite this sort of slow, simple downfall, the strings just make each step along this line shimmer. It is a breathtaking transition, and yes, we do go back to the cycle, I believe, once before we get the ultimate transition, which is a speeding up rhythm, correct? And that speeding up rhythm, I think, is just these pulses that get faster and faster until we are firmly in the next track. Or am I mistaking something here? Was that the next track?
No, that's how the transition plays along, and that is for Lonely, press play. First off, I'm find this title very endearing.
Well, it very much speaks to music culture that we all relate to. This idea that if you're lonely or if you're anything, essentially, just press play. Just listen to music. It can.
No, it's not about music itself. It's about media in general.
Oh.
Video games, movies, television, all that sort of stuff.
Fair.
When you're lonely, dive into something to numb you. This is once again going into that numb theme.
Okay, I want to interject to correct here. I do believe the transition that I'm describing is from this track into the next track, so I'll hold off with that. If you had any other comments...
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that was
Mr. Tembo.
We're going to get quite a change as we go into the next track here. But, Matt, you mentioned that there was a transition here that you felt worked perfectly into this track, and since I cut you off, I want you to explain that further.
Well, no, I just thought that the way that the Hostels kind of deconstructed itself towards the end worked into this track because this track also is fairly mellow in its start.
It does deconstruct. That's true.
And the thing about Lonely Press Play, though, is I don't know that it's a numbness necessarily. I think it's an escape, which can be numb. But I think it's more about
that's
escapism.
better. That's much better. That's much better.
This song represents escapism. And me, as a child, while most people would sit under their covers in the dark with a flashlight reading a book, I would be sitting under the covers with a flashlight so I could see which button on my Walkman was the play button. And I would sit and listen to music.
Really? By that age, you hadn't just, had the feel for it? Known where your thumb was supposed to
Oh,
go?
I had used my Walkman so much I'd worn off the actual print. They didn't have indented buttons. They were printed.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Curious.
On my first Walkman, anyway. But, this idea that if you're lonely, or if you're sad, or if you're happy or depressed or whatever, but in this case, it's if you're lonely, press play, escape, go somewhere else, whether it's a video game, a movie, a book, a song.
And this song also does something a little bit interesting on top of just the theme work. It's the percussion here has a texture that is so endearing, yet also comes off as a little foreign, with a kind of a pop to it as you're going along. That's
right.
Really, really, really disconcerting to some extent. It does leave you feeling a little unnerved.
Well, there's two things going on, and that's the two things that you're noticing are, number one, the bass. And the bass is kind of the driving element of the song. I mean, he's playing around with rhythm in the bass, and that is true. This is still a very minimalist track, but it's still very texturalized, and that's the second thing of what you mentioned. But first, just to get the bass out of the way here, the bass carries this very steady rhythm that's a very simple cycle that repeats over and over again, where it just plays on the 1, the and of the 4, and then the 1 again, the and of the 3, and then the 1 again, the end of the 4, and the 1 again, and so forth. And it just proceeds over and over and over again. But it's this nice little halting rhythm that's very easy to just kind of groove right into.
I was going to say, it felt very engaging because it was kind of simple to get into.
Yeah.
Get into the rhythm and predict it.
Yeah. Not as cagey. But then along with that, we have that number 2 element, and this is the exploration of texture, which is really, really strong here. And this is what I would call a delicate ensemble of alleyway percussion.
Yeah.
Lots of little pops
Yeah.
just
That's
going on
really
and on.
good.
It really feels like a few members of Stomp just decided to join in for the little shebang at this moment. Not that it's very, overruling, but it's groovy in its own way. It's using very raw tones, though, to create that groove, apart from the very reliable bass.
And that rawness is what keeps it from being just a completely settled groove piece.
Indeed.
It still keeps your blood a little bit high, so that this is not a fall asleep kind of a groove. This is something that you're still waiting for the other shoe to drop as this is going along. And then you add in some of the texture once again with the piano work. Once again, it's being dispersed throughout it.
That's the
It's
main
being
thing
put
I want
on
to get
top
in
of it.
here.
It's that the texture of the piano, shying away from the really lightness of Hostiles. Here, it's complementing the melody, I think, a lot more.
Yeah, it does complement the melody. At the same time, we have a lot of comping going on by the instruments beneath this melody that, to be honest, overshadowed the melody a little bit for me. And that is the piano. As you said, the piano work really is... It has a genre shift as far as I'm concerned in this album, but I think it was totally smooth. It's the kind of thing that goes in line with this somewhat dim view of the world as we're building it at the moment. And I honestly thought it was pretty jazzy.
I can see that.
The piano, it was incredibly jazzy at this moment, like smooth nightclub level jazz. But it's an even simpler array of chord motions that builds this jazzy progression. It's just, as far as I can tell, it's predominantly the minor 1 to the major 7th. And beyond that, there was just all these little scattered, bits and bytes, you could say, that compose the elements of those 2 chords. But it's the playfulness that you expect to go with jazz. A little bit here, a little bit there, kind of as this ever-present color throughout the entire piece. So you have that going on the side of the percussion with the little alleyway instruments, and then you also have that going on with the piano. The only thing reliable here is the bass. And that did leave me feeling that this track got just a bit scatterbrained by the end, because I was loving the jazz nature, but I think this is one instance here at track 3, the first instance where I felt the chord progression may have held it back.
See, and I'd be inclined to disagree, not with how you feel about it, obviously, because it's your feeling of the song. However, I would incline that it was a lower point in the song. I was really driven by a lot in this song, but mostly the lyrics. I mean, the chorus, "If you're lonely, press play," which is the final line of the chorus, I really connected to, mostly personally, because as I just told a story about staying up late and listening to music to escape, I can relate to the song very heavily. And so, while I understand the musical issues that you have, I personally connect to it on an emotional level, which, as I've discussed, can bring me a little further with something that may, quality-wise, lack a little bit.
I think I'm going to be on Matt's side here. I'm especially happy with the actual pacing of his vocals in the chorus. I think that's what held everything together, that kept that jazzy element from really escaping what was already being built, what it was being built upon. It kept it unified because the stutter and stop and stutter and stop of what he's doing, the breathiness of his vocals, allows the track to breathe and get interesting with, experimentations and texture, but it still unifies it. It still keeps it cohesive enough to keep it from unraveling. I think that jazz nature was reined in enough with his vocals to keep it from being a negative.
All right, that's an interesting interpretation. I gotta say, this is where I was at here. The most interesting thing for me was the jazzy element because it was new and because it was just so moody in its way. But after it got a little scatterbrained, I will admit that the vocals became sort of my second go-to. And once I went back to those vocals, I am right there on line with Matt again when it comes to that line, especially that specific line, "When I'm lonely, press play." It is this escapism that we've defined over and over that I think kind of defines this track, and the moodiness, I suppose, is artistically intentional in this regard. I don't dispute that. But I do know that when it comes to tuning something out, it became a little bit harder to get behind this because of the fact that I know that very often when you're pushing play, that form of escapism can be just as healthy in as much as it is still escapism. Often it can be inspirational, which then brings you to the next point in which you're actually out of said loneliness. So, it's the kind of thing that I felt almost was diminishing the effect, or just presenting it in somewhat of a more destructive manner than I was able to get behind. I wanted more out of the music, and let's just say if the jazz had kind of kicked itself up a notch, then this song may have ended up reaching a more positive level for me. I know that's not its intention, but it's just funny how that one little quirk could have turned it into something totally different for me. In the end, I was left sort of wanting on both ends.
In this case, I don't think it would have been appropriate, only because of his equation of technology becoming a form of drug, becoming the new drug of this generation, of blink feeds and updated statuses and YouTube videos and this, that, and the other thing, not being as constructive as it can be, as being inspirational as it can be, but becoming a drug. This is a major theme throughout the album itself of and I'm going to start going into it now, how technology is sort of isolating and destroying society to some extent, quote unquote destroying, but mostly just breaking society apart.
Well, I think also we're at a point where we're only still starting to wrap our brains around our data intake. We are not designed to, or we weren't at least designed to take in data the way we are, constantly being connected. And in fact, that's why so many people burn out or get overloaded on constant contact to this stuff.
But at the same time, we're also changing the definition of what humanity was meant to do anyway. Absolutely. On a daily basis.
Absolutely. But I feel like that's the reason why so many people sometimes burn out, is because they're just not capable of handling a heavy data intake.
No, I follow you. But, well, here's the thing. This is more of those it's kind of a thesis sense of concept album, where there may very well be people who come along and say, "Oh, I don't agree with this 100%." It's a take on humanity that can be disagreed with,
Yes.
whereas many things are coming from a very personal standpoint. And I'm not saying this album isn't coming from a personal standpoint. I'm sure at many points this reflects the way he feels, and that's not to be disputed. It's just funny how little musical moments could make me take the message in a different manner. That was my my experience at this point. There's still plenty of positive things to say about this song and the album in general. For instance, third track in a row here, strings are utterly beautiful, and the melody itself is still very, very sweet. I guess my only problem with this track was sort of the lack of development. It helped artistically, but again, it implies things that I think could be disputed had different choices been made. It's a little roundabout way of saying it, but I'll leave it at that.
I will say, though, that I did find a connection here that I didn't see initially coming upon escapism. I get now track 4's placement, and you can argue this later, but I want to at least make my point. So track 4 is Mr. Tembo, which is a very groovy narrative.
It's sort of an Afro-Caribbean bash of sorts.
It also has a little bit of history. This was actually an elephant named Mr. Tembo that Damon met while overseas. It was a recently orphaned elephant that had wandered into an aerodrome. He kind of wrote this song as a fluke. He introduced this song to his producer, and he knew he was gearing it towards more of a kid song than anything else. But the producer liked it, and he liked it. They flushed it out, and it's sort of the story of this lonely little elephant that doesn't know where to go.
And so this song is an escapist story. That's the connection I'm making. The reason I feel like it has a place on this album is because the following track after this one is very rooted in reality. The previous song talks about escaping, and this song is the escape. That's where it fits the narrative of the overall arc of the album. This song starts with, it is very groovy. It has kind of a few pop tropes in it, but it utilizes them well. And yes, it's clearly a story. You can tell from the minute it starts that Damien is telling a story about this elephant. I enjoy also that right after the first verse, we get a choir. And not any choir, but actually a choir from Damon's hometown of Layton. It's the Layton Stone City Mission Choir. And they're featured in this song and a song later on in the album as well. And, I mean, choirs are one of those things that can be tropey, but I really like a beautiful choir. I mean, and it really adds to the childish hugeness of this narrative that he's trying to convey.
More like the universality of it all.
Yes.
And obviously, if you're equating the same human condition to the condition of elephants, then it better be pretty universal.
Yeah.
So, artistically, yes, this all makes sense. I do believe this is going to be a hard one to get behind if you don't know the story about the elephant. But that's why we have research. And incidentally, perhaps to bring up a point from my last little rant, this would be something that would be fairly impossible if we didn't have the technology by which to do this and look up these very things. So that's a little bit of a snag.
Yes.
Either way,
when you're taking this from a musical point of view, it's kind of an oddball, to say the least.
Yes, it just seems very out of place considering the tone of the last three songs.
It's an enjoyable song because it is very endearing. It's upbeat in nature.
Very sweet. It sounds
it's cheery,
very sweet.
and I will give it this much credit.
It's infectious more than anything else.
It is infectious, and it lightened up the album in a sense. I mean, this album was headed in kind of a dour direction, but it was my kind of dour.
I was enjoying where it was heading.
It was unique in its dour. I mean, the only thing is that when you take the format of this song, this sort of African bash with the choir to go along with it, the sort of gospel choir style, it is very familiar. It takes you in a place where it's just like, come on, I've heard that before. Whereas the previous stuff, we were getting into kind of some new stuff, albeit with familiar inserts such as the jazz, such as the stuff that we know from Damon Albarn's previous work. But other than that, this dourness was unique. I think that the musical texture was unique, and that we were kind of robbed from that texture of this song. It was very appropriate in terms of this album's overall message, and it made that metaphor excellently, I think, as far as the character of the elephant is concerned. And it's sort of a way to sort of bring children into the mix as well, and say that they cannot escape this progression either, or at least this humanity's progression. But I don't know. I gotta wonder whether kids would really see that.
There could have been more intriguing ways to talk about the displacement of nature due to the encroachment of mankind upon the territory of living creatures, and you can keep going on there for quite a long tirade. It's
more intriguing, perhaps, but I will say it's unique.
Yeah. It's still, for all the, when you get the backstory, it's bleak, but at the same time, there's a little bit of hope here. Give a helping hand. Help out Mr. Tembo. He's Mr. Elephant. He needs help. His name actually means elephant, so he is Mr. Elephant.
But then we have to talk about the freestyle here, which comes 2/3 of the way through the song. Well, excuse me, even later than that. It was very much toward the end, which was sort of what I felt it was kind of a heavy-handed insert of the album's theme into something that could have a more simpler implication. The freestyle goes: logistics, haulage, golf, bungalows, spires, canals, cows, hay bales, telegraph wires, pylon power, farmhouse over chimney still used, stones, satellites, football pitches, faded flags, and lots of dogs. Neon cross on top of a block of flats, and a church not as usual. Very provocative lyrics. At the same point, it is tough for me to connect this with the elephant.
Well, that's that's the man-made encroachment upon the natural territory and all the things that we do, which displaced this element, causing to be orphaned because he couldn't stay with his herd. Yada yada yada.
But was there a direct release? I mean, was there a direct connection between that the elephant was orphaned or disconnected as a result of man-made encroachment?
I believe there was, in fact, a specific instances of words in here that actually do mean what happened and why the elephant was there. It's more speaking to what's going on in a lot of developing countries and even a lot of developed first world quote countries.
Well, yeah, sure, especially when you consider what's going on in Brazil. I mean, we've heard the narrative of they're chopping down the rainforest for years and years, and it hasn't stopped being true. They're still chopping down the rainforest, and it really just depends on how much people want to talk about that or not. And yes, this will cause similar types of problems.
And also China and India
regard.
And Indonesia and most of Southeast Asia. Yes, there's a lot of Greenpeace in this one.
I think what it is at the end of the day, when it comes to how to take this track on the album, is that it's very in line with the album's theme, but it chose to go toward much more of a specific direct cause and effect kind of thing, how it affects a universal society. The cause of, the cause being technology, and then the effect being the various natural problems that will occur as a result. That's somewhat of a disconnect from the overall album's idea, which is the individual's relationship with said technology. I feel by including this track, we suddenly have a much broader message, where without it, we had a stronger, narrowed message.
I will definitely agree with that.
Yeah, but I feel like the broader message what was intentional. I think that's what he's going for, is this mix of a broader and more narrow message.
Kind of a back and forth.
Yeah.
That's not saying that every Robots is a very personal story.
Well,
it's still more about the individual opposed to anything else, though.
Sure, but a lot of times, even if it's not using him per se, and yes, it was stated this was a personal album, a lot of times it still is, I think, the individual, whomever you wish to place in that one stead, their relationship with what's going on.
But I think what's becoming clear here is that there are also bits and pieces in every song that ties directly back to him. Like, this is based on an elephant that he actually met, and stuff like that, too.
Yeah, I guess if you interpret the elephant as the individual, then you could even cross over in that sense.
Yes.
there's lots of different ways you go back and forth here. So I guess we'll just leave it at this. I think it just comes down to we have to return it out of theme as very often we do, and just say how did this fit musically on the album? And it's just a little bit forced for me, just a smidgen. But it was a release. It did pick it up. And we have interesting things to follow that also could be construed as not terribly connected to the overall thing. And hypocritically, I'll come out and say it, I liked this one. Track 5, we get Parakeet, which is just a sort of 43-second expose of, I assume, his parakeet or a parakeet. It literally is a parakeet looped, I believe, from just the opening soundbite. The chirp. And that is looped. I can almost picture him just sitting by his piano with his parakeet just hanging overhead and feeling inspired. And so he wrote this. But it's sort of that snapshot brilliance that I kind of love to see, especially in the middle of albums.
Well, and also this is really great because it's where the album gets personal. Because if it is his parakeet, it is him canoodling on a piano and fiddling around and playing something quite beautiful. And it kind of almost brings you into his living room in this personal moment with Damon where he's playing his piano and listening to his parakeet chirp.
Were you able to dig up any information beyond that one, John?
On Parakeet, no. A last 43 seconds did not seem to warrant its own Wikipedia page or anything of that type.
You don't say.
No.
I think we should provide it then. This is the stuff...
I love
to digress.
Yes.
This is the stuff that I love to see out of early Chad Vangelin, whom we reviewed his most recent album, Shrink Dust, in episode 97. But prior to that, he had older albums, and I discussed it at length in that particular podcast about his earlier work and how very often it was sort of stuff that arose from ideas and demos. Ideas that very well could have been turned into larger things, but he made a conscious decision to not turn them into larger things. So they were specific, short excerpts, self-contained excerpts, which I guess doesn't make them excerpts. At that point, it's just a piece. But it's a silly variation on a theme. This theme particularly being the parakeet chirp. And I think it was brilliant. It was lighthearted fun, and it was still consistent with the rest of the album from a textural standpoint. And that's the big connect here. Those little bloops that come out of this. This is kind of like water drops. You can hear that over the parakeet itself.
Just even the layering he does on it just fits in the theme that had been built, definitely within the first 3 tracks, and definitely leading into the next song.
Well, also the piano work too.
Yes,
links.
That's what I mean.
Very well. Okay.
This is I would just call it excerpt art.
It's an interlude. It's an interlude at its core too. It's just something to break up the album a little bit.
Yeah, I read into interludes maybe perhaps a little more than most people because I enjoy them so much.
And so this leads us into The Selfish Giant, which is track 6, which also has quite a bit of beautiful piano work. And this is one of the songs, as we mentioned earlier, that has a featured artist who usually goes by the name Bats for Lashes, is her stage name, but her actual name listed as well is Natasha Khan, who is a beautiful female vocalist who, when she's layered with him on the choruses, very much blends with his voice. And it's not a matter of hearing one over the other. It's the idea of creating one sound of 2 voices, which I loved. But let's jump back to the beginning in the intro.
I found myself falling in love with that first verse, with just the intriguing piano interplay on that simple beat was so much fun. I really was enjoying it.
Let me be blunt here. This is, at least in terms of the introduction of this piece, this is the evolution of what I found back in track 3, Lonely Press Play. That kind of jazzy piano work there is expanded right up front here in The Selfish Giant as a sort of exotic, somewhat of a foreign scale, but still on the piano, so you have that connection. That's a through line throughout many pieces on this album. Is the character that the piano has is always unique in almost every track. How much is developed kind of varies by degree. In this particular case, that exotic scale does develop into this sort of jazzy section again, and it's a little bit more fluid than it was back in track 3, Lonely Press Play. Even within that, you have these brief piano phrases that are just so exotic in their own right. And it's unique for that purpose, but it's also pervaded by this bass beneath it. And the fusion of those two instruments here, I just thought was expert.
But, and this is one of my first major gripes on this album.
I think it's the same for me.
The chorus goes too big, too fast, with complicated ethereal noise on the higher register. It completely eliminates the piano for the first chorus, and I believe the second as well. You said you were enjoying the harmonies the voices were doing. I could not tell there was a second vocalist. I was stuck with chaff on top of it that just really went nowhere for me. Was taking that original bass that was really still there. That was still there. Yeah. The percussion, all the lower register was still there, but everything that was thrown on top of it, too much, too fast. I couldn't handle it.
Which illuminates what I was saying in that track 3 had this chord jazz component that I felt wasn't developed enough. Now this intro here exceeded that chord jazz component, but yet again did not develop it enough. So, it was a bit of a letdown on both fronts for me.
I will say my biggest problem with the song is that the verses did seem to trudge a bit, though could be intentional considering the title of The Selfish Giant. I did enjoy that you really had to listen to hear the disparity in the voices, because they were so close to each other. I thought it made a beautiful harmony. I will agree, though, that you had to listen and focus to find it, but that sweeping sweetness was there in this song if you looked. However, the effort it required to find it was a little much.
I like how we're on the opposite sides of this, where Steve and I kind of honed in on the verses and you're honing in on the choruses, because I really honed in on what the lyrics were of the choruses. I loved the chorus. I had a dream you were leaving. It's hard to be a lover when the TV's on and nothing's in your eye. I had a dream you were leaving, where every atom falling in the universe is passing through our lives.
Oh, excuse me. Then you might have misspoke the first time you said that the choruses were where you felt the downturn.
Yes. That was the chorus.
Oh, you were reading the okay.
That was the chorus. That was that part.
Okay, I follow.
What he's saying is really great, because that's where you learn who the selfish giant is. It's not either of them, the relationship. It's the media. It's the TV. It's that boob tube that's on that's draining their relationship.
Well, and that doesn't surprise me considering the theme of the record thus far.
Well, there was something else about the verse. Well, no, you can continue on that point.
I just think that it's really a great way of creating this giant, this view of the media being a selfish giant, that it takes and takes and takes without giving back, which is kind of true. Depending on the media or the medium, it does. I mean, think about, just what we put into our website, for example. It's a form of media and a form of technology that takes and takes and takes from us. We're working to have it give back, and it does give back in certain ways. We are fulfilled. However, it still does take a lot of our time, a lot of our money, a lot of our effort, and a lot of our intelligence. It's just,
But see, that depends on your interpretation. If the media, in this case, we perceive ourselves as some form of media, but that would imply that the media, or that we are in the position where we take and take and take and take. And I believe that's what this is getting at, is that the media is in that position, not that the media is the victim.
No, the media in this case is the bad guy.
That's
it
what I'm
is
saying.
The selfish giant.
Well, that's what I was saying. I was kind of...
So Crash Chords is somewhat of a bad analogy.
Well, no, I was saying Crash Chords takes a lot from us as far as effort.
No. That's not what that's not where they're coming from here. They're saying that the actual...
Yeah, but we're Crash Chords, so it's a little problem.
No. It's not the production of the media or anything like that. It's the TV itself.
Oh, okay. Then
it's having the TV on.
Irrelevant.
Yes.
It's just that when you're talking about
a little
us,
bit.
You're saying we're taking from us.
Yeah, you kind of vilified us.
That's
and
honestly,
I don't believe everything that they're saying here. I do know that putting a TV on for too long, yes, will start draining your brain a little bit. But at the same time, I mean, a lot of good comes out of being able to share entertainment.
That's the same thing as before. That almost goes back to my gripe, is that there are things on this album that can be disagreed with. And of course, yes, you can say that about almost every album, but it's the fact that this album happened to raise a social issue that is still hotly debated, almost 50-50, because no one really knows exactly where society is headed. We can just perceive trends and then imagine the utopia or the dystopia that follows.
But I don't know that he's definitely saying that this is it, that it's all selfish, the media is selfish giant. I think it's just his perspective of the media.
Of course.
This is a very personal perspective, so while you could disagree with his personal perspective, it's still his perspective and he's giving it to you. So you can disagree with it, but you can't disagree with how he's
But it warrants
describing
discussion, doesn't it?
Absolutely. But I'm saying that you can't disagree with the stance he's created. You can disagree with him, but he's still creating something that's very definitively him, and you can't disagree that it's him.
I understand what you're saying, but you can disagree with an approach to a specific topic.
Yes, I agree.
I would like to point out one thing, and that is you're talking about the jazziness of this and the jazziness of Lonely Press Play, both talking about escapism into media, both talking about trying to numb yourself or being numbed by electronic entertainment of some
and yet
sort.
that implies some kind of uniformity. As in,
I'm just talking thematically.
No, that's interesting. Just because
of,
you mentioned jazz, and jazz is supposed to be this wildly unique, individualistic venture.
Now it's just
that
flashing
is contrary.
lights trying to entertain you, which may be why it's not going anywhere. Maybe that's why it's not really culminating, is because it's the empty calorie jazz of the mass media. I don't know. I'm getting a little bit deep here, but that
actually is
be...
exactly the way I perceive this at some times. Which, I mean, if there is a logic behind that,
if it was on
south
purpose,
as it may be on me,
if it was on purpose, it was really purposeful. It was really pointed. I know defining a word with itself, all that jazz, but God, I created a pun. Didn't even realize it. I feel
all
bad.
that jazz. Matt, take us out of this.
So this song does complement the following track that comes after it, I think, at least musically.
It does begin, though, kind of a numb slide, I think, of what I feel on this album so far, because of the fact that I felt, from a musical standpoint, theme aside, yet again, I felt like this could have benefited from more emphasis on the exotic. Whether that would have aided the theme, probably not, but, there's certain things here that just from a musical perspective, they beg to have more of. The piano is underused. And then, of course, there's still moments here where the verses, they just rock and forth between the sort of major and relative minor, almost the same experience we had last week with Spoon.
Yeah,
just
but
the
this
same
is that
kind of
clutter
thing
that John already talked about earlier when we were talking about this song.
So I'm just saying, but whether you feel it has purpose behind it, that's just, the effect on you can still be bland.
Yeah, I mean, it's a personal perspective at that point.
Yeah.
And the next track is track 7, You and Me, also has a featured guest. This has the Brian Eno on it, of Roxy Music, to name one of many things he's done, but a very well-known artist in his own right, and a friend of Damon's. Worked together on this track, and he will also be featured later on the album. This song is a 7-minute and 6-second monster, but it doesn't feel like it, at least to me. This song starts in this kind of almost ethereal feeling, and we use that word a lot, but it did have a very vast, almost spacious, almost alien feel, but not alien as in extraterrestrial necessarily, but more alien as in foreign.
It actually felt to me like it needed a visual element.
That wouldn't hurt, and that was present in the verses. No, it was there. It was there. I met the Moko Jumby, which is actually a stilts walker.
Oh, okay.
So he walks on stilts through All Saints Row. The verses get very descriptive, and the choruses are extremely explicit in what it's trying to convey to you. In you, it radiates on you. 7 high, they're rising, over on the other side of September when the sun sets soon now.
There is...
I love this chorus. I want to know what he was doing, what he was thinking when he came up with these words, because they are beautiful.
It is very easy sometimes to overlook the inherent poetry that is behind his voice. Because of how he sings sometimes so naturally. You often are, I think, more focused on the melody than you are in the words. But behind this, just to read it is fantastic.
Well, he's always had a very poetic lyric delivery. I mean, even in songs as early as Blur, a song like Song...
Sure, but I remember the delivery almost more than I remember the words sometimes, and this illuminates the words.
Yes, I would agree. But, like, this reminds me of the song, actually, the verses remind me of the verses to a song called Song 2, which is one of their better-known songs. People remember the chorus because they're so repetitive and they're so easy to sing, but his verses are so poetic and almost contradictory at moments, and it makes you think. And I like that he has a delivery very similar here in the verses, you know, and the lyrics, again, they make you think. He's describing things, but not in a very matter-of-fact and plain way. He's making you think a bit, making you do some research, and making you want to better understand what he's talking about.
And this song does undergo a huge tonal shift.
But what I
in
like
the second
is that
half, it completely eliminates the very ethereal quality. It comes crashing down to earth. It becomes almost full acoustic, not a whole lot of synthesization, and it starts off with a new chorus, a completely different chorus, but a new one. You can blame me, blame me, blame me, blame me when the twilight comes and all goes around, around, around. And this is a great chorus for a completely different reason. The blending and merging of this phrase work, the way he mixes himself, and just the varying of his pronunciation and pacing of each word is phenomenal.
Well, and he also delivers this chorus in a round, which is great for the final part of the chorus, where he's singing around, 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 in a round, which I really enjoy.
And we should emphasize this is chorus 2, which is the second chorus of this song, because you could really perceive this song as just two wholly separate parts.
But there's an instrumental through line, I feel, with this song. And also what I like about this song is it doesn't rush to get to this second half. It takes a time.
Oh, definitely.
It meanders. It's very paced. But it never feels slow or boring. It's just paced. It's beautifully spaced, and it's well... It moves along at a well pace that you don't feel in a hurry to get to the next section.
But to discuss what you said before about having an instrumental through line, I mean, it's interesting considering that... the whole mood between these two halves is strikingly different because of how the first half almost speaks of something elevated. Even when you describe it as alien, you're describing something as furiously unique, something that is sort of an entity unto itself.
Right.
And then when you go to the next half, where suddenly we do strip away that, what we were calling a sort of ethereal quality, and it leaves it very barren, kind of. It's warm, but it's barren in the sense of we know what has just been shaved off.
Which is the mystique.
And I think
it's mystique, and that's done through the instrumentation here. So it makes this, in many ways, two completely separate tracks.
I think the through line is that there's still this connected emotionality in the lyrics that pulls the story together a bit.
I'm gonna go back to what you earlier said. Stand up for that one. I think that the music itself doesn't shift so far between the A and the B to really warrant a necessary separation. Yes, you can make them two separate songs.
Well, the one thing that binded them was the steel drum transition.
But that steel drum was...
The pacing is very similar. The percussion is extremely similar.
But the steel drum that transitions also with it is hitting notes that were done otherwise by other instruments in the first half of the song.
It's not doing anything different. And this is where I'm actually going to have a complaint. For all the great vocals I love, I don't feel like the song actually goes anywhere. Even in the separate sections, the A, the B, I feel like they just kind of stagnate a little bit too much. I don't want it rushed. I'm not saying that it should have gone from A song to B song more quickly, but I would have liked maybe a little bit of an expansion or maybe even a depression when you're going to make that transition, because the transition itself comes across a little abrupt, going from that A to bridge to B.
I mean, I think it's almost impossible to discuss this without discussing the lyrics themselves, and obviously the lyrics seem to imply some kind of falling out between these two distinct sections. I'm not saying that it should have been two completely separate tracks. You can't have a falling out unless you're describing it within one cohesive entity.
Well, and I think also, since it's called You and Me and it's supposed to represent this this dichotomy between two people, you would guess, that falling out is supposed to represent the falling out between these two people as well, which I think it conveys very strongly.
The first one could also, Section A is obviously the other person, you, and Section B is obviously me,
who
just from the
more,
tonal shift and
it
the
could
vocal
be more
shift.
a more down to earth point of view versus
It's
a
down to
more
earth
ethereal.
because obviously for two very simple reasons. I mean, well, one very simple reason. The first implies that they were in love. Love, of course, is going to have to bring in all the ethereal instrumentation that goes with it because it's meant to be uplifting. It's meant to be bigger than something, bigger than anything we know, and then we're suddenly grounded in this cold reality. Blame me. You can blame me.
Well,
it's about as much of a reality as you can get. I mean,
that's what it is.
In terms of cold, hard defeatism.
In you, it radiates on you into blame me, you can blame me.
Yeah.
It just undergoes a perspective shift.
And then you also get that line, all goes round again, which is, as you said, sort of sung in a round, which I found was very clever and cool at the same time. Beyond that, of course, it kind of implies that there's a cyclical nature to this. That there's nothing eternal about Part A here, but something very eternal to Part B, which is depressing as hell.
But a very astute and interesting perspective.
Yep.
Which I think really makes the song a solid, cohesive piece in the end.
So that brings us to Hollow Ponds, track 8.
So Hollow Ponds, we have another narrative again, but this one is more personal. So Hollow Ponds is actually
more personal.
A place. It's an actual pond in the town where he grew up, and he actually samples sounds. I believe it was this song. Yeah, he samples sounds from a playground in Layton, where near his old school when he was a kid.
He also, towards the end of the song, samples sounds from trains
going into the London Underground from his town.
But all these lyrics that he brings up on this song are points of his life. Like he refers to the '76 drought that he experienced. He talks about the green man and the green man that left him back in '91. Which I'm still not quite sure where that's coming from, but this is actually just referencing parts of his life as he's done it. In fact, the line about 1993 is references the Blur's song "Modern Life Is Rubbish," where its origin comes from, which was graffiti he saw while traveling the London Underground.
Yeah.
So this is very, very personal.
And you knew you were going to get a song like this somewhere on the album. I mean, he's someone who has incorporated a lot of his own personality into the Gorillaz, as well as let it shine through here, as well as in Blur. But I think it's kind of also refreshing to take a moment to hear where he's coming from on a very personal level.
And I also said, and I think I got a little bit tentative agreement, that without these vocals, this song could almost be used for a spaghetti western.
I kind of could go along with that. I mean, and this depends. Obviously, there's some implications considering my comment on this as to how you feel about spaghetti westerns. But there is something that I just felt was a little musically dull about this track. It was a little harder for me to get behind. I mean, in points it's nice. For instance, it has these little brass sections, which I particularly liked at the end. But other than that, I mean,
it felt like a montage music.
It's exactly. Like,
I would agree.
There are long, slow portions of spaghetti westerns that have just personally been a little difficult to get behind at times.
Well, I wouldn't agree about the spaghetti western thing. I'm not disagreeing either. I honestly have no opinion on it whatsoever.
But I see the montage, and if that's what you see for a montage, then so be it.
But I want to speak to that montage bit. I feel like that could be considered intentional because he wants it to feel montagey since the lyrics are montagey. They're essentially about his life in snippets, and that's a montage, more or less. And I think that he stripped down the music a little bit to focus on the lyrics. I'm not saying it's right or it's better. I'm just saying that might be where the structure comes from. I will say
this is another one of those. This is yet another one of the intentional sort of art versus product concerns, because of the fact that I may find it dull, but of course I see your point. Of course I see what purpose this serves to well, to the album in a sense is actually a little bit varied, only because this really focuses in on the past. It takes that element, which I know is under the larger umbrella, probably in a sense of getting closer to a childhood that may have predated most of this technology crap.
Which I think is also part of it, is this looking at this history to go back to a time when.
I mean, these are very... just the natural imagery that goes on here, apart from just hollow ponds. I mean, I was by the Black Sea, 2 hours in time, spicy urchins and a new school bell. This is like a Victorian postcard right here.
Yeah.
I mean, not that the guy's that old, but, you know, it's it really is almost painting like an idealized past in a sense. But that may very well end up becoming true, because even these dates, 1976, 91, 79, 93, they predate most of the modern technology that we could say is governing our lives today. I mean, as late as we go there, which is 93, is still just the early days of the internet, when it was more of a novelty than a thing.
And I think that emotionality is conveyed in the song setup, whether it's musically engaging or not. I think it comes down to personal opinion, which you both have expressed quite clearly. But I think structure-wise and art versus music, as we were saying, artistically, I think it's a very strong track.
Well, it still works with the theme. It does.
Yes. Well, because we just said it's a past before all that stuff. I found
No.
back.
It's also ship on hollow ponds was filled.
It's a destruction. Finish the line. Ship on hollow ponds was filled up with the dreams we've shared on our CDs.
But
which I think is one of the most provocative lines.
It's also the pausing. Ship on hollow ponds was filled up with the dreams we shared on our CDs.
But that's just a melodic break there. That's a through sentence.
No. His pacing don't care about melodic breaks. He's done some weird things. I think that was an intentional choice. Also, the Green Man, I think actually was some sort of forested area, was some sort of natural preserve, where half my road was now a motorway. I mean, I think he's talking about the changes to the world around him that he had to experience, and it seems to boil down to man encroaching on nature.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, but specifically with that,
it still fits the theme. It still fits the theme. That's what I'm saying.
But see, this is the one interesting thing about you cannot dispute that connection between Ship on Hollow Ponds was filled up with the dreams we've shared on our CDs. In other words, the dreams that he conveys through his music utilizing digital technology.
Yeah.
He's literally like that. That's a very important break. I think in some sense he's almost implying a defense.
Well, I think he's showing the conflict within himself.
Bingo.
There's an internal conflict as well as an external conflict, and this song focuses ultimately and resolves with that internal conflict. And that leads us into the next track, which is 7 High.
7 High, which incidentally is in 7 time.
And it's a 1 minute long interlude track as well.
This was so awesome being in 7 beats, because it took me actually 2.5-ish repetitions to realize it, because there was always something wrong with it. There was always something in this melody that I couldn't quite get my finger on that was just a little bit disconcerting, because it's a back and forth. It's a complicated versus a simplistic back and forth, and having it in that 7-beat framework just made it eerie as all heck. I want the song that goes with this. I want more. I want it.
It felt almost mechanical. It had an eerie beauty to it. And you both said that you wanted a fuller song from this. I
did not.
Oh,
I did. I was the one that was harping.
I'm a fan of the short little one shots.
I think this is a very succinct track that gets exactly where it needs to be in the amount of time provided. I think, like Parakeets, it's beautiful in its construction within its framework.
I agree 100%. I think this song is 100%. This little piece is 100% succinct. It in many ways, it's kind of a song of white noise, which is kind of what we're surrounded by. The piano, interestingly, is the piano section of this little piece is one key apart from the music that you hear after that, the muffled music that sounds as if it's being played through a television, and hearing that both go on at the same time, this little human quality, this music filled with humanity next to something that is obviously born of the technological era, where you can hear exactly you can hear the filter, or the lack of filter, as it were, coming through the airwaves, coming through the speakers, and then the choice to actually separate that by a whole key it's brilliant in a sense, because it shows that there is a disconnect. Kind of again, it's a little bit of a heavy-handed thing. It proves that there's a disconnect through art, but still, that is one of those cases where, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, I don't think anyone can dispute this particular approach.
It also comes off a little bit like dueling banjos, the call and recall, or what's the word?
Call and response.
Call and response, thank you. Effect that's going on between the two sections as they go back and forth,
Hence the 7 beats. And it also may contribute as to why you have such an awkward 7 beats. It's 7 beats to feel in a natural world, and then 7 beats to feel in
an unnatural
world. And each of those are unnatural, because 7 beats is so odd. In other words, you complete your experience with one and you're left unfulfilled, and then you complete your experience with the other and you're still left unfulfilled, as if it just didn't reach that nice, happy 8th beat. And that's again, brilliant.
Yeah, I agree.
I can't put that anymore.
And I think it brilliantly transitions to the 10th track, which is Photographs, parentheses, You Are Taking Now, which features a sample of Timothy Leary from an audiobook he'd done in the 60s. And, I mean, just starting from the quote, that doesn't start the track. There's Damon singing first, and then the quote comes in when he gets to the progression that leads to the chorus. But it adds this kind of haunting air, almost this depressing kind of downerish feel to this track, because the hollowness of that old recording mixed with the music that he has going for this track gives it this kind of spookiness to the idea of photographs, which at an old time were believed to steal the soul every time you took one.
Or it also,
which I think it plays into that lore.
It starts playing into a little bit deeper there, where all these people, the millions of us on the hill, from the star to land's ends, when the photographs you're taking now are taken, now press send. Well, if there's a million of us taking all this beautiful vista, well, what's the point? What's one man capturing something magnificent can be pointed, can be poignant, can be emotionally inspiring. But when millions are all taking the same photo, it very quickly will dilute, will become passé, will become unimpactful.
An emptiness it's trying to convey also of those images.
There is another interesting element, though, and that is the Timothy Leary quote. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the Timothy Leary quote?
I did, yes.
This is a precious opportunity. Beware of the photographs you are taking now. And the fact that, and you know the history of Timothy Leary being sort of this advent, the progenitor in many ways of the American drug culture, where the photographs in many ways was the experience that you had under psychedelia, under hallucinogenics. The photographs were the things that you created yourself and burned in your own mind. I find that interesting, that for something that is so individualistic, that's interspersed here with all these images of something that could very well be sort of despecified.
Yes, and also the idea that with these photos that
capturing, I kind of look at it this way, not to interrupt, but I think I got some. Capturing these photos is not the same as experiencing.
Yes, that's where I was going. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So,
returning the favor.
A lot of people complain, and I'm one of them. When I go to concerts, if I'm going to concerts as Matt Storm from Crash Chords, and I want to cover the event, I take a lot of photos. But if I'm going as Matt Storm, fan of music, and I don't want to cover it for the website, it drives me bonkers when people are watching the show through their phones, videotaping it.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
don't look at your phone, dummy. Look at the band in front of you. The worst thing I had to experience, and Powerman 5000 handled it very gracefully, well, specifically Spider, is the whole time he was singing When Worlds Collide, which is one of notably their biggest hits, a fan favorite for sure. Someone had a phone in his face the whole time. The guy had his hand up and the phone up. So Spider went to shake his hand, and he hit his hand so hard the guy lost balance and had to bring down his phone to regain composure, and then just continued to rock out the song and didn't remember to take the phone back out. But it's one of those things where that guy is missing a chance and awkwardly interacted with a musician because he was looking at his phone. If he'd just been interacting, it would have been different.
You're speaking to the idea of by putting a layer of technology between you and nature, you cease to actually experience nature, which is kind of what this is trying to convey.
But there's another little crucial element which I don't think I 100% conveyed before, and that is this whole drug culture thing. I believe that is actually being connected here to this technological element, sort of equating drugs to technology in the same sense, in the fact that it is an aid.
Earlier.
Yeah, the fact that it is an aid to you.
Yeah.
It is an aid. It's ideally it's supposed to enhance your experience in a certain way.
It's an interpretive device. Device. Weed could be considered an interpretive device for understanding lyrics.
But either way, it still is a distracting device in that same sense,
yes,
and takes you away from the core element here. So
yes,
I think really that's the main purpose of this track, or at least it's because the fact that technology is not really something you see too much in these lyrics, apart from simply the photographs you are taking now. But I see a considerable amount of references to drug culture. So I think just replace the same analogy that you just made with the guy and his phone at the concert. I would more say that what he's trying to get at is the guy getting high, taking cocaine in the bathroom at the concert because it enhances his experience, and that in itself is also taking away from the show. I would
agree.
That's a huge portion of this.
I would agree.
I think this whole song gets summed up in easily my favorite line of the album, period, bar done. All is but a vanity, and the metronome knows that defeats you is the monochrome that you seek. I love the poetry involved with this. The repetition beats you by giving you exactly what you want, the sameness, or the experience, or the picture, or the photograph, or what you're looking for.
Right, and
doing all this is purely vain. Doing all these drugs or immersing yourself in technology or whatever you want to interpret as evil of this song.
Think about a fan who goes to a show and turns his back to the stage to take a selfie with the artist performing behind him. Is exactly a synonym for that.
That is a great synonym.
Yes. This track does
analogy.
We do get a bit of
thank you.
We do get a bit of a change though when we move on to the next track, which is track 11, "The History of a Cheating Heart," which I love as a title. It's a very clear title message wise of what this is supposed to convey, and it starts out as a very acoustic track. It's an acoustic guitar and Damon's wonderful vocals. And it instantly conveys into this very lonely, isolated feeling. You know, this idea that, you know, the history of a cheating heart and the life they lead is a lonely and depressing and isolated one. And then it kind of swells a bit as if it were going to move to a sweeter place at around 1 minute and 30 musically, but it doesn't really go there the whole way. It becomes a layer for the background, but it still lingers in that kind of isolated place, never comfortably moving out of it.
And this is where I'm going to nitpick the album as a whole as well as this song. I feel like there's been a little bit too much numbness involved with this album, and this song really shows it here. It's not the numbness where you've been so hurt you have to shut off emotions, or you're so angry you have to shut off emotions. It's not actively seeking numbness. This song just felt disinterested. I didn't know where it was going because it kind of just went nowhere. I wanted more. I wanted a little bit more complication because there's no passion here. And it's so hard to do on a micro scale of a song or a macro scale of an album, something that kind of promotes non-passion, promotes numbness. And here it really bled through as just being too much of this unemotional state.
I agree 100%. I have to say, when it came to this track, I felt myself a little bit more pulled in than some of the preceding tracks. Because in general, I agree with what you're saying. I think many of these tracks they just suffer by being a little bit too numb. And I know that's tough because he's striving to sort of recreate that numbness as a metaphor for what we're all kind of going through. But yeah, that's a little problematic when you're delivering on an album scale, because then you need it to shine in very astute moments, such as in color, such as in rhythm. And he has done that here and there, but sometimes not always fluidly. Very often I find myself highlighting things in this album that are elements of interludes or comping instruments, as opposed to, let's say, the core verses and choruses.
It's the strength of the melodies is not quite there throughout the album.
But I
think that's what it boils down for me.
But I do want to pull away and say that this track, I can't put it in the same league as some of those moments that I was just describing. John sees it here. I don't see it here as much. I do think this track did an excellent job in conveying that isolation and loneliness.
Yeah, I'm with Steve. I feel there's too much emotion here to consider it numb. It's just the way he's singing and delivering these lyrics, you feel the pain in his heart and in his voice, and there's not a numbness in this song. I flat out disagree. I'm sorry. It's not here. I will agree, though, that there is an overarching numbness on the album, and it can be a bit trying. That said, it's also probably very intentional, like Steve said. So it's a dichotomy and a conflict that we will probably have to discuss further in our wrap-ups.
It has to do with the melodic power of this track. Sometimes, not always, because very often I adore his melodies, but sometimes you can almost gloss over the melodies in place of other things. In this particular case, the melody is just way too strong, and it boils down to that one line: the history of a cheating heart is always more than you know. It's just this inner strife that you feel within those lyrics. It's hard to ignore.
This idea that someone who has a cheating heart, or someone who is a cheating kind of person, that their history, their struggle, there's more to it than you could probably ever understand. For better or for worse, for right or for wrong, there's more to it. And it can be an isolating life, because if you go around hurting lots of people, reputation delivers.
It's also if you've cheated once, you've probably cheated 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times in your heart anyway.
Right.
You're already isolating yourself without ever cheating. You would have been doing so. Well, yeah, I like the depth here. I like the lyrics themselves are pretty good. I feel like he's so disinterested that I just can't get on board with this one.
I don't sense disinterest. I sense, like I said, it's depression and loneliness and isolation. But I don't think that he's removing himself from anything. I think he's plunging headfirst into this void of emptiness that he's put himself in, or the character is in, if it's not actually representing him. Though I do believe this is either about him or about someone close to him.
I feel the pain in that line, and yes, the always more than you know is very important when it comes to sort of isolating the origin of how a certain problem erupted and whatnot. It's always good to ask questions.
And I think this song is perfectly paired with the final track on the record, and I have a reason for that.
I love this final track.
So the final track is Heavy Seas of Love. And this song features both Brian Eno, who had been on earlier, and the Laystone City Mission Choir as well, are both in this track. And it's just a very uplifting track. It gives you this peak of hope after all of this bleakness and numbness and depression and loneliness. This is the exact way to describe it is it's a silver lining song. It's telling you that no matter how bad it gets, no matter how depressed or lonely or robotic or isolated, there's still something out there. There's a silver lining, and I think it's just beautiful.
It's end credits.
Yeah,
it's a great finale to the album itself. It does
really-
a great job of kind of summing everything up because it actually brings back a lot of the theme work from other songs as well, especially in the lyrics. Radiance is in you, another line. The seeds, the day, just the imagery is very reminiscent of little tidbits here and there throughout the whole album, which is pretty good. And the water references from Hollow Pond, it's a summation without being just a restatement of the same themes over and over and over again.
And what I really like also is that this ray of hope that is really delivered by the choruses, because the choruses feature Brian Eno and this choir and Damien all singing together in unison, and it's gorgeous. It really conveys this hope that the song is trying to deliver.
I don't think Eno actually did all the choruses. I think he was primarily the verses. I think they only got together for the
final chorus.
And even then, he may not have done it. I think
Either way, though, even if it was
with that dichotomy between the two voices,
yeah.
It was actually really... That added an additional layer to it. Because the choruses, Damon, what he's singing about, the heavy seas of love, I just love the imagery he's throwing in there.
Yeah, that love is a thing that can get you... Essentially saying that love can get you through. It won't always be easy. It won't always be good. It won't always be fun. But ultimately, love can get you through. And, I mean, I'm a hopeless romantic, so a beautiful message like that is wonderful to me.
F you.
The message is beautiful. The song is just not as beautiful. I'm sorry, but I feel the way John felt on the last track. It's not enough.
I'm honing completely on the vocals and lyrics here.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting.
Can we not ignore? Can we?
No, we're
are
waiting
we all
for you.
ignoring the music?
No,
here,
we're
then?
waiting for you.
We're waiting for you to deliver that side of it.
That's your job, man. You're the best.
All
at
right,
it
fine.
here.
The music came off as hokey. I think I can't feel what you feel in this track because the music didn't convey it very well. It's a very common message, everything that you just said. Love will find... I mean, all you need is love. It goes back to 1968 there. Come on. It is so fundamental, I think, in terms of human art, in terms of the entire history of art, to convey that love will get you through all problems. Love one another, and it will fight all.
But he's not saying that.
But see, I think in a sense, that's what you're saying.
No,
that's what
I'm
you
saying,
just said.
No,
you got from this.
No, I'm saying that love can find a way, but it's not going to fix everything. He's conveying here that love is a silver lining and there's a hope, but that it's not going to fix everything. You're saying, all you need is love is a very different message. This idea that no matter what happens, all you need is love and you'll be just fine.
And here's where I'm going to defend Steve quite a bit, because that boils down to high hopes. I've got high hopes.
That's the hokiness.
Yeah, it does come across as that. I like the fact... I love the fact that
it may be a
they're
little bit
drawing.
more in depth. I understand that it's more in depth, perhaps, than just love will find a way, or all you need is love. Yes, there are some other elements there, as we pretty much had in the previous tracks. But then all you wind up is sort of a summation kind of track that introduces a little bit of all the former, and the music just did not live up to that, in my opinion. I wasn't even the first one to point it out, and I don't agree with this 100%, but John had originally mentioned it sounded like a 1970s sitcom lead-in or something like that.
Yep.
Which, maybe that's a little far, but there was definitely somewhat of a dated vibe to this. Nothing of the wildly unique stuff that we got earlier on this album, or midway through this album. I just thought it was kind of a flat ending.
And that's that's where I got a problem. It's kind of generically end credits. I have to hone in, though. I love the fact that they do reference previous songs, that they really are doing a great job of summing up the lyrical and vocal aspects of this album together in one spot.
I think
but I'm on Steve's side on this one, that it's musically doesn't bring anything to the table.
I could care less. I'm not saying that I could care less about your opinions. I could care less personally that musically it doesn't bring anything to the table. Because for me, the dichotomy versus track 11 made this song more powerful for me, especially lyrically. And I thought the vocal delivery was beautiful. I will agree that the music was repetitive and almost unnecessary.
I have one other comment about that vocal delivery, and that's the fact that, much as I love Brian Eno, I don't know. it kind of ruined the consistency of this album for me to hear his voice as the primary vocalist at the end here when I was so accustomed to hearing Damon Albarn. It's the kind of thing that you can have somebody help you out along the way, but this was one of those cases where I felt the heavy hand of the guest. And unfortunately, that took away from the character of this album. It felt like something that was separate. It felt like it didn't belong here in many ways. The only thing it really had in common with, in terms of just feel, because it was a little bit more happy-go-lucky, was
Mr. Tembo.
Mr. Tembo, that's it.
I would agree that musically it's divorced, but message-wise, I completely disagree. I think because it's a summation and also relays earlier messages in the summation, lyrically and theme, it's connected.
No, this is an issue where I even have to say the first time in the album where I think that even message-wise it was a little bit of a cop-out. It's the predictable end to an otherwise engaging story.
It's not just love silver
but predictable
lining.
doesn't make it divorced.
No. I don't think it's not just love silver lining. No, it's. I think you gotta delve a little bit more into the lyrics themselves because it does have a more unifying theme. When the world is too tall, you can jump and you won't fall. You're in safe hands. What the day will now give, how those seeds will now live, it's in your hands. It speaks a little bit more to taking responsibility than just love will find a way or any of this love theme work. Yes, heavy seas of love, but it's not just love is going to do something. It's that you have to love nature to save it. That's what I think it really boils down to. All this technology encroaching upon society and kind of divorcing people from each other, from nature, from natural things. Love still does the unifying part of bringing people together.
I think that if you want to say that it's a predictable end, I can't disagree, but I can't say that it's divorced from the theme.
I'm saying that the poeticism of it is somewhat underwhelming, considering what I have gotten so far. Even in the poetry itself, I'm just not as wowed as some of the previous tracks here. When the world is too tall, you can jump, you won't fall. You're in safe hands. Oh, did you just read that stanza? Oh, I'm sorry.
This is the same exact stanza that he wrote.
Excuse me, I zoned for a minute. Either way, just maybe I was picking up on those lyrics as you read it because it's not striking me very much as powerful in its way. Like I understand what it's saying, but it you could boil it down to simpler language. It's some fluff. That's what I feel.
Okay.
Otherwise, I was fairly satisfied with this. Should I start the wrap up?
Sure.
Or I don't know. Do you want to go first?
Unless anyone has any more pertinent ideas that are on the brain.
No, I'm just offering to go first because you so often go first.
Let's not waste time discussing who will go first. Somebody start the wrap up.
Anyway, I have always been a fan. No, strike that. I've usually been a fan of Damon's earlier work. I like most of Gorillaz. I like a lot of Blur. I've heard a lot of his set work with other artists. Like he did one album with Flea.
Yes.
Pretty good. I thoroughly enjoy a lot of the stuff he does, but not everything is great. Plastic Beach, I really couldn't get on board for when we're talking Gorillaz.
Well, I really like that album, though. Demon Days is still my favorite.
Yeah, but it's like he gets a little bit scattered, and when you look at his previous work and you look at this, I can see that same effect coming through here because there's a lot of back and forth and going here and going there when you start talking the actual music, and that's something that takes this unifying arc and starts to take it apart for me. When you have music like Mr. Tembo, even Parakeet and Seven High, but Mr. Tembo and Heavy Seas of Love, it can break up an otherwise great arc because these songs are really outside the realm of what we were already getting. At the same time, I want to also be a bit nitpicky because so much of what was great about this album is that it was layered so awesomely at parts. It had great accent work, but there's, like Steve said earlier, there's so little in the melodies, in the harmonies for us to expand upon, because it gets a lot of looping, a lot of just repetition of the same progression throughout the whole song. But it's so alright in so many cases, getting that repetition, to be able to just go and mellow out and enjoy this music, because this is a very mellow album. Its highest energy points are the oddballs, and the rest of it really is an enjoyable, fairly introspective to extremely introspective, depending on the song. It's just, it's like little tidbits here and there that we already went through. I'm just not feeling it as a super high album. That being said, I'm still putting it as a solid 4.2. I'm going to get into the regular decimals. It's a solid 4.2 album. It's nothing life-changing, and it's got a lot of quality there. There's not really any songs on here I dislike. Not by a long shot. I like pretty much everything on this album. That being said, it's got cohesion problems. It's got just repetition problems that keep it from being an upper echelon piece.
I'll go a little further with I mean, I can't be so harsh against certain instances, only because when you're talking about elements like the melody and like his vocals, you really can't find fault. They're really just beautiful in their own way, which means that this album lies in this strange threshold between it being just good music and then making the lasting impression. It's really just walking that line for me, pretty much front to back, but it had much more of a chance in the front, which means I think this album was a bit of a fallout for me. And because it just didn't seem to have that bold direction that other more impactful albums would sort of naturally have. I feel like sometimes the broad nature, the thesis here, is actually holding this album back a little bit. It's interesting to discuss the disparity between nature and technology because of their fundamental differences. The personal elements, which interestingly, in this album, should be the most engaging, sometimes fall out a little bit because there are other elements that can't quite support it. I can't really explain why that is, but maybe it's just because we look at so many different factors, so many different aspects of challenges between nature and technology. I mean, from the very first track, I have a feeling that this album sold itself very strong right up front, because of the fact that as the title track, Everyday Robots in many ways just sums up this album in the very, very beginning. The rest is a lot of sort of snapshots and scenes of instances. I could almost equate it to the function that, for anyone who's ever seen it, the Animatrix served to the Matrix trilogy. It's like, alright, we're not delivering too much in the way of plot, but Animatrix serves to provide you with the fundamental knowledge of how the world came to end up in that situation. And it's actually, that may have been a Freudian slip, because actually that's the whole theme work of the Animatrix is actually about nature versus technology in many instances, and the crossover between the two. So, when you're looking at this, I kind of want to equate it to that. But then we end up with some tracks that I have to say, I'm not really looking too much toward the theme work. I'm really just looking toward the music. I think Hostels is just a beautiful song from beginning to end. I think the string work on this album is beautiful beginning to end. But whether or not string work really implies nature or technology, I mean, I kind of want to go to nature because it's so inherently romantic. At the same time, I see it as strong music, and I feel like there could have been more to come out of this if he had just gone further in the music department and explored some of these ideas more than he explored the theme. The theme is solid, and this album's gonna go a little bit higher than John for that, because I've done more for theme in the past for certain. I kind of want to place this at a 4.4. A little bit shy of 4.5. Because I think 4.5 or higher would leave me with something grand. But I mean, granted, if I gave Jack White's Lazaretto, somewhere in the same department in the lower fours for its theme work, which sort of explored the gray areas of humanity, which again, it's an important thing to discuss. I want to kind of give this the same cred. It's an important thing to discuss, but I think it could have been fused in so much better just by being a little bit more focused. That said, there's just some things here musically that I do think Damon Albarn is doing better than ever, and that's probably why it's going up at 4.4. Actually, 4.3. I'm going 4.3. Just leave it at that.
You didn't even have to say something to convince him otherwise.
I don't know. It's tough. This is a very strange. Remember what I said. It lingers on a threshold between being good music and having a lasting impression. So I don't think I've ever given a 4.3 that way, and I somehow feel the closer you get to a 4.5 means that I would be going back to this, which I can't imagine I'd be doing anytime soon.
You wouldn't be going back to this album?
I don't think so. There's a few things. The first track, especially,
The
but some of those
interludes.
jazz things, especially. But these are all the in-between moments.
So I'm going to start right off by saying that I think I just view this album very differently from you, which is fine, because, I like interpreting things a bit differently. I think that this album, I agree that the theme is very solid. A very solid theme. Musically, it's enjoyable. I really like it. I am going to go back to this album a lot, especially songs like... what was it? Press Play, Lonely Press Play, is a song that will stay in permanent rotation because it's a song that I personally identify with. But the whole album is, as an album, I find akin to Gorillaz and Blur's work as far as something that I will constantly go back to because there's so much to pull from here, even in its moments where it seems out of place. Even though Mr. Tembo doesn't feel like it fits on this record musically, I think... my enjoyment of the song itself personally is enough for me. Now, albeit that doesn't make it a great song because I enjoy it. You can enjoy crap. But this isn't crap. It's just, it doesn't fit to the overall arc as well as some other stuff. But I think that Damon is doing some great work here, and I think putting it under him... Because there's really no reason why this couldn't be released as Gorillaz work, other than he worked on it all by himself.
They're missing about 4 individuals that would make this Gorillaz.
They're not real people.
I'm talking about the other people that he works with.
I thought you meant the band members.
The people who make the music are the band members.
I know, not the act. Never mind. But my point is, though, is that
Difficult.
I think that he's on the right track to something really great, and I think this is a step in that right direction. And I think that this topic that he broaches is a really strong one worth further exploring. I think also that his album artwork for this record of him sitting alone on a chair with just the title scribbled up above his head in a grayscale of the whole cover is very much a preview to everything you're getting in this track, because ultimately it feels like he's leading himself to isolation. He's leading himself to wanting to be alone and removed from this technology. But the difficulty is that he's reliant on this technology to make himself heard, which is what that line, I think, is really about with the CDs that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I agree.
It leads to that. But I don't know. I don't just see it as detrimental as you guys do. It's by no means a 5. This isn't perfect. It doesn't. It still doesn't come close to St. Vincent, who was just, for me, there in every way. She really calculated that album perfectly to me, and it as far as pop music goes, I feel like it's the pinnacle at the moment of what we have to offer as pop music. This is not the pinnacle of anything, but it's making strides to get there. That said, there are still gaping holes in it that I can't award it a 4.5, because a 4.5 is still something that we'll move to the next step. I don't have quite the same dichotomy you do about if it's lower than a 4.5, you won't probably come to it again. I listen to tons of stuff that are 3s or higher.
No, you're right. That was a false. But I
just feel like it's not.
You won't
fair
be
statement.
obsessing over it.
I won't be
like you have over some things.
To be honest, I've probably obsessed over things that have even been under 4. It really just comes down to the cohesion, I guess, in the end. And the cohesion, I think, is what this is missing.
But for me, I think this is something that I really enjoyed and identified in moments with, but overall emotionally was very dead. There was a lot of emotional emptiness or vagueness that made it hard to truly get behind it. And to broach the 4.5 to 5 area, I need an emotional connection throughout the majority of the record. And I really only connected emotionally in a few places. Intentional or not, that's a problem for me. So for me, this is a 4.4. It's almost a 5, a 4.5. But that emotional void leaves it shy of that for me. But I think he's doing great work, and I think that if he continues to pursue solo stuff without the Gorillaz, I think this is a good direction for him to go. Analyzing society and its fluctuations from an artistic perspective.
So you're not that far off from me anyway.
No.
4.3 to 4.4 for interpreting this album so drastically differently from me. I mean, yeah. No, I think you conveyed a lot of the way I feel about this, so I don't think we're that far off.
I think maybe
this is the final note on this album. I'm really intrigued by a lot of what's going on here. Cohesion is the big problem. I think in the end, direction is the big problem, but that's only because, as I said before, he chose such a challenging and broad thesis. It almost kind of brings me back to like college days when, you know, you would write a paper and you would have all these good ideas. You would love to just sort of go knee deep into something and you feel like the passion is there and almost like the academic higher thought, but you just don't have the focus with which to throw with which the reader can sort of take away this long-lasting effect from. Each term, it's sort of like, well, are you saying this or are you saying that? Or are you just sort of coming up with ways to kind of repeat how awesome this one thing is? Or are you actually driving toward a point? I'm sure the point here, and we all have pretty much figured out, is that, yes, technology is probably hurting our effect. But of course, we at several points reached instances on this album, and I reached it no more perfectly than back in, excuse me.
Photographs?
Nope.
Selfish Giant.
Nope.
Lonely Press Play. Because I'm running out of choices.
Selfish Giant. Yes, you were right.
Oh, okay. I thought it was Selfish Giant. That's why I guessed something else originally.
So we reached this point in Selfish Giant where we were just sort of trapped in this area where you want to perceive media as this big bad. And yet we got into this big discussion about, well, how bad could they be? Because in a world without media, we would be blissfully ignorant. And I don't perceive that as a good thing either. So there's not really an answer to anything that he's saying. It's really just reactions on this. And they are very deadened reactions, which ends up as a very numb album. And when your whole focus is driving towards something that's numb, it's very hard to kind of get behind. It's just an inherent problem with his otherwise powerful vision here.
I guess that maybe I was hasty to say that we are interpreting it quite differently, but I think the thing here is that I'm more forgiving of that vagueness than you are, is the only difference. Which
apparently is worth a whopping 0.1.
Apparently. But I think that, truthfully, he wanted that. I think not necessarily whatever our rating is. He probably doesn't care what our rating is. But I think that what he's trying to do here is be somewhat vague because he wants people to think and debate. And if that's the goal, he accomplished it, at least to a point.
I agree with what you said about the album cover as well. The album cover is very much a precursor to everything that is going on here. It's a numb cover for a numb album with hints of beauty and the unsettling. Which
is a great artistic choice. For better or for worse, it definitely works overall as far as his artistic choice goes. Wow, we went a lot longer on this record than I thought we would.
And I just have a short discussion to come up with.
To come up with, you mean you have?
Not to come up with, to
Well, he
to
hasn't
go
discussed.
into.
As far as we know, he hasn't come up with it yet. Come on, improvise.
No, the problem where passion gets in the way of ability, especially when we get to artists that we know have and will and can and are better than some of the things that they've done.
As in?
Well, one of my favorite choices is the one I
There's
didn't
a lot
have
of vague
to...
verbs you had there.
No, one of my favorite choices is the one I didn't have to review, and that's Flying Lotus, and his ability to make music is severely hindered with his passion for his music at times.
He's very self-absorbed in his creation. By the way, he has a new song out. It's on Spotify.
By the way, I think I told you that earlier.
No, I listened to it at work a few weeks ago. So
I'm sorry. Was it any good?
Oh, you too.
It's okay.
But some of his ideas were just...
We all love Putty Boy Strut now.
Yeah, we do.
That's true.
Some of his ideas were really, really, really good, and they, at length, were terrible. When it got down to it, it was just hard to listen to some of his stuff.
Well, that's why I made the analogy of the paper anyway, because of the fact that a term paper, which people expect to, especially a dissertation, a major dissertation, which can be at length up to like 50 pages of material, is obviously expected to be fluid front to back. It's meant to be persuasive. It's meant to have this sort of driving motion. The academic community really wouldn't accept anything less. And if it falters somewhere over the course of these 50 pages, which is very likely to happen, considering it's 50 pages, then your work will suffer, your point will suffer. So albums, obviously, are not quite to that extent. Still, they've become the standard. It is expected that as a musician, you can't just get away with having perfect moments or perfect songs. There needs to be that long-form drive. And it does give you so much opportunity to explore various things. It gives you an opportunity to explore ideas, to tinker around with them. But at every single turn, you run this risk of kind of derailing and having a little too much fun in one area, or perhaps the opposite end, getting a little bit too bored in one area by your own idea. Hence, we get so much repetition on albums. Repetition that presumably you should be able to just groove into, but that's a gamble. That's dependent upon taste.
There's also tropes we've talked about almost some of them, maybe even 100 episodes ago at this point, where you go too hard too fast. The passion
all
sensitive.
Rise.
Yeah,
all rise.
But just the idea of trying to be too quick in conveying one idea into something else. Because you want to say, well, this is love, but you don't give it time to build up.
Oh, then my mistake. It's not all rise. That would be just...
No. It's love, love, love.
Yeah, that would be no
sensitive,
rise.
Sensitive passion, to coin myself. Like, it's... You can...
That would be all climax.
There you go. You want to do something. You want to convey a certain emotion or a certain idea, and you just don't know how to, in Steve's own words, fluidly do this. That was one of the things you were harping on.
To the paper analogy, that would be like cutting straight away to your conclusion, or repeating your conclusionary paragraph over and over and over and over throughout your entire paper. There's only so many ways you can make your point strongly by simply saying it. You need to kind of build toward it, and that's the challenging artistic process that artists have to kind of grapple with.
Well, yeah. Well, it's this idea also that some artists are content to just put out the same smut over and over again. I mean, while I would like to believe that Steven Tyler isn't completely destroyed by drugs and actually has a knowledge of music, and I like Aerosmith. I've kind of always liked Aerosmith. But their newer records are so formulaic because they're Aerosmith and they can get away with it and people will buy it. So their passion or lack of passion has given way to repetitiveness. Whereas on a different side of the same coin, AC/DC, who I also love, puts out the same stuff over and again, but they're so passionate about everything they do that it kind of has this wash of just heavy rock.
I don't think Aerosmith is not passionate anymore. I think they just want to keep conveying the same meanings over and over again.
Whereas AC/DC explores some different meanings, but kind of stays within the same formula. But they're also, like, I mean, they're AC/DC. They can do that, and they've gotten away with it for so long, people kind of expect it. But I think it's more forgiving of old bands, whereas newer bands, like, for example, Flying Lotus, even though he's been around a little while, is still relatively new in the scheme of things, is already so conceited in his own work, and with good reason, because some of it is actually pretty technically incredible. He gets so caught up in it that the intricacies get lost on him because he doesn't care. Which, I mean, if you're the artist and you're putting it out and you don't care what anyone else thinks, then more power to you, I guess. But the idea is, as an artist, to find a balance between what you love and what fans want. The idea that you want there to be some fan service, but you also want to fulfill yourself.
Right, and I think style is another thing to really factor in here, because you honed in on such rock personalities. I'll just take this another way, because what we're talking about today is something that's almost close to a concept album. I don't want to quite go so far with that, because there's not this sort of continuous narrative, but we do have that overall idea. Just to have an idea doesn't have to be a concept album, but sometimes concept albums get away with a little bit more, because there's just this idea that obviously they're linked, especially if it's a narrative, it has to be linked. So in many ways, you'd expect almost to visualize a concept album as being more impactful anyway, just because it's a concept album. I can remember when the Decemberists released their first concept album, which was Hazards of Love. It was interesting because Decemberists kind of already have this concept to their entire persona, and that is this drive toward the quirky little eccentricities surrounding 19th century life, surrounding immigrant life, surrounding Irish folk, surrounding all these things that we might perceive today as quaint. And it's so apparent in their music, in their dress style, that they, as I said, I think very recently in a recent episode, I said it is indicative of this whole indie folk style. It is the archetype in many ways for it. So, when they came along and released the concept album Hazards of Love, of course it was going to be highly rated. And that's why, for many reasons, it's not really my favorite Decemberists album. It's good. It's, at some points, great. But sometimes it lacked that individualistic cohesion, because it felt the need to constantly just drive along. And that's the one thing where albums really do get to explore beyond what I said before as the term paper analogy. They get to explore different things along the line without having this continuous through line. In many ways, they can be more artistic for doing so, because otherwise they would just do opus after opus after opus. And at least if you have an epic to work with, it's very easy to write the varying songs or chapters that coincide with the stages of that epic. But if you're talking about a theme and something vague, it's so much more challenging.
It can be, and it sometimes isn't. It depends on the concept album. I mean, there are concept albums that are concept as in what they're conveying content-wise, where the sound can be a little looser. A concept album that just came out very recently is MC Frontalot's Question Bedtime, which is structured on its basis level as a kids album about nursery rhymes.
Questioning authority.
Right. And the funny thing is there are several skit tracks on the record that he's talking to a comedian or personality like they're a child that he's babysitting, but they are talking like an adult and mentioning their age, being 30 and this and that, but still has that dichotomy of, these people are questioning bedtime and he's the babysitter, you should go to bed, filtered with songs that are taking fairy tales and turning them on their head. Some of them are direct interpretations, like Billy Goat's Gruff, which he does. There's a song called Much Chubbier from the perspective of the three goats and the troll. But he also does a song like, I can't remember the name of the track now, but it's about Goldilocks, but instead of the bears trying to eat Goldilocks because she ate all their porridge, the concept is Goldilocks is a bear murderer and you should keep your doors closed or she'll sneak in and kill you and your family. And it's this idea of taking these fairy tales, fracturing them a bit, but still linking it with a through line of these. He's still a babysitter trying to get these kids to go to sleep. And all of these songs are different bedtime stories that he's told featuring other artists.
See, that's interesting, but that also hones in on how a concept album, as you just described, it pretty much has this set thesis from the beginning. It was apparent. It was just inherently bound not to fail in many ways because the thesis was pure. It was solid. So as a result,
here's a concept album that didn't have it, and that was Uno, which was supposed to be a punk revival album.
Oh, come on, that is not a concept album.
No, that was the concept that Billy was going for.
That's it. No, that's just a theme. That's a theme. That's not a concept album.
No, that's where it's the idea of he was so enthusiastic. I'm bringing it back to the main topic. He's so enthusiastic of trying to get back to his roots here. He's still thinking he's a punker. Still thinking Green Day is a punk band. He didn't realize, Billy Joel, Mike, and Trey did not realize they are no longer punk rockers. They weren't. From American Idiot, from 21st Century Breakdown. Those weren't punk albums. The whole passion of what they were doing, the whole concept of that album of the trilogy was before, during, and after party experience. And it was set within the themework of punk. And it was just undefined. They didn't know what they were doing with it. They were just making the same stuff they knew that they could make and throwing in lyrics that they were trying to convey a story with.
So this idea that the passion for their own music was so strong that they buried
they wanted
themselves.
The original. They wanted that first taste all over again, and it just didn't work out. It just they could not get it out right.
I feel like any artist though that goes back to try and make lightning strike twice in the same place is doomed to fail. Mm-hmm. Because if you're so focused on your past, you can't see your future, and it's cliche, but it's true. If you focus so hard on your own past and going back to your roots without incorporating anything you've learned, you are doomed to fail. You need to incorporate what's new with what's old to return to what's old.
All right, well, John wants to talk about this idea of passion in music. That does kind of equate to what I was saying about a concept album, and I still want to make that distinction between a concept album and simply an album that may be varied, that has a good, solid theme.
Okay.
Again, today's album, I'm still pretty sure, is just an album with a good, solid theme.
Yeah, I wouldn't say this album is a concept album.
Right, but when you incorporate the idea of passion for one's work, I do think that there is an inherent truth that a concept album, a true concept album, will be the theme that was unified and driven by passion front to back. Because otherwise, it wouldn't have been so organized to begin with for us to even call it a concept album. In other words, anything we call a concept album is really just an idea that was pursued with passion extensively. It doesn't mean that they can't fail, but it means they are less likely to fail because the passion is driving the work along with the cohesion of the idea, because they seem to be more married in concept albums. Still doesn't negate my statement before that I think that's easier to do in some sense, because once you've gone sort of balls to the wall with the specific narrative, then you no longer have to deal with the individual problems that might rise on a regular theme-driven album that still has separate tales pertaining to a specific overall thing. Concept album would be more unified to begin with, but a regular album with a theme is just disparate, and still you have to peer into it and find the connections. That needs to be done on the artist level and then again on the listener's level.
I actually want to revisit this discussion of concept albums because I think we need to really further define what those words mean.
What also has to do with just whether the artist has stated it as such.
That's not
in it coming out.
That's not 100% true though. Because an artist could say one thing and it could just come off as not what they said. But it happens.
It might, but because of how artists are interviewed, usually it's taken to its word.
But I think
I would really like to revisit that song.
But I think that Steve's statement here is a good gateway to where we're coming from and to that potential future topic. It's true that if you're driven by this passion in that concept, you could execute it better than most.
Yeah.
Ultimately,
the irony in today is that the passion for this project was what happened to be aimed at an environment that he felt was deprived of passion.
Yeah.
Ironic.
Which came, well, no, it came across as non-passionate passion,
Yes, I think that's a genre
which is really freaking hard to do.
now.
The non-passionate passion.
So quickly before we get to next week's stuff, typically I would go to Steve for spam mail, but this week we actually have a fan who wrote us a comment on our episode with Molly.
Oh, no, I have to drop my sarcastic voice. I'll try to do you justice.
Yeah, there
I'll
you
try
go.
to do you justice, Eric. Got my consonants confused. Matt, Canadian folk is my jam. Some Canadian folk that you guys need to check out before the once is Stan Rogers. He was the guy for Canadian maritime folk music. It was his version of Made on the Shore, which was on the Once's album, that was the inspiration for the version the Once did, as he just said. Also check out the Waylon Jennings. Yep, that's right, the Waylon Jennings for beautiful three-part harmonies. They tend more toward bluegrass and gospel than maritime folk, but it's all still there. Also great are Madison Violet and Chic Gamine. I firmly believe that Canada has the best folk music in the world right now. Additionally, when you guys were calling songs in 3/4, they're more accurately 6/8 since the melodic phrasing lands on every other group of 3. Fair point.
I
Fair
love how he nerded out with you on that one.
He did nerd out, and I was very pleased with it.
And as far as Canada having better folk than anywhere else in the world, I think that's mostly because hipsters tend to go north for the summer.
Really,
and
like birds flock south and hipsters.
No,
go
I'm
north.
not. I'm making a little bit of a joke, but Montreal and other areas around there have huge indie hipster populations. I mean,
I'm not doubting you.
I mean, it's like you can't even drive the streets at times. They're just flocking there.
Well, anyway, Eric, to comment on that point, I actually did look. I believe I don't recall exactly what I said, but I remember at least 2 songs in that album. Nell's song. Nell's song, I would argue, is in 3/4 because I think the pulsing and the melodic phrasing still lands it on a group of 3. But I don't recall what I had said in the podcast. But the track "What Will You Be Building," I think that is definitely in 6/8. But it may kind of throw you off with one measure of 3/8 now and then returning it to 6/8. It has this little hiccup to it. I think you'll notice. I did not notice that last a couple weeks ago.
So thank you for pointing that out, and we'll definitely check out those bands. Maybe we'll find something we want to review on the podcast in the future. John, what are you bringing us next week?
Next week, okay, I was trolling around on various media programs, and I was trying to find something a little bit different because I think we're getting a little bit heavy in rock and indie and all those sort of things. So I found a post-metal, post-rock instrumental band. Don't oi me. They are set and setting with the album A Vivid Memory,
Which just came out this month. September.
I believe this week.
Oh, okay. So
Maybe
you
the
knew.
2nd, but it might have been the 9th.
What was that genre again?
Post-metal rock instrumental. A
Wow.
five-piece band.
Interesting.
Lovely.
So that
Ensemble, because they
we
don't
have that
sing.
to look forward to next week. Thank you, John. As always, please check us out on Facebook, Tumblr, Twitter, on the YouTubes. We are currently working on putting out more content. Stuff is in the works. I did tease my collaboration with Schaefer the Dark Lord. Well, his song anyway.
I still don't believe he's real.
And making a music video for his song Boo I'm a Ghost, starring Luigi in his game Luigi's Mansion. I'm working on that project currently, so you will see it when eventually it comes out. I will not give you a release date, and
When things happen,
that'll happen.
When things happen, everyone will know.
But thank you, Eric, for your comment. Please continue to comment on the website. Send us emails, admin@crashchords.com for any questions, comments, or concerns if you don't want to post directly on the site. We are, of course, always taking requests, preferably in the newer vein. But if there's an old album that you feel warrants us checking out that maybe went under the radar, please let us know. And on that note, I will wrap things up by saying, as always, music is life,
And life is good.